First of all, so 6.2 is all about adding and subtracting. And when I say a rational expression, I'm just looking at an algebraic fraction. That's good enough for now. So let's remind ourselves how we do this. When you do like a 1/8 plus 1/8, if you already have a common denominator, what do you do when you add fractions? You keep the denominator, right? So you always want to keep that denominator. And then 1 plus 1 would be 2, so you do that. Then you would reduce the fraction. I'm going to reduce this in a different way. You can reduce it in your head, or you could do it like this. I'm just going to break down the 8 into 2 times 4. And then if you do that, then what do you have as an answer? 1/4. Okay, like that. So if you already got a common denominator, you're going to keep that denominator and then combine the numerator and then reduce. Okay, if it's an algebraic fraction, you still do the same thing. So this one will go the same way. You keep the 12. 5 minus 3 is 2. You can reduce that in your head, or you can factor that 12 as 2 times 6. I'm doing that because when you're doing algebra, that's more what you're doing, is you're more factoring and then reducing. So what's the answer? 1/6. Okay, everybody remember that okay? Now all we're going to focus on for a few minutes is the algebraic fraction if you already have the same denominator. If you do, it's quite easy to do. So these right here are going to start off pretty simple. So this one right here, you're adding 2 algebraic fractions. They already have the common denominator, so what do? You keep that denominator, right? Then you add the numerator, which would be 6 plus 7. That would be 13. Now all you got to do from here is think about, does anything reduce? What do you think? Yeah, there's no x's that cross out. 13 and 14 is as far as you're going to take that. I mean, 13 is just a prime number. 14 is 2 times 7, so nothing's going to cross out. So that means that's as far as you can do that. Okay, that's about as easy as it gets. Okay. The next one's very similar. You have the same denominator, so what do? Keep it. Don't touch it. Then you got 16 minus 3 is 13. Okay, is that done? Yep, 13 and 23, both of those are prime numbers. You cannot reduce 13 and 23. The only number that goes into 13 is 1 and 13. Only thing that goes into 23 is 1 and 23. So that's it, okay? So sometimes the problems are just that simple, okay? Now the rest of these are just going to be a little bit more involved. So what we want to do with this one is they already have a common denominator, so you keep that m minus 2. And then you just combine the numerator. Now when you combine this numerator, there are no like terms. So you just write it that way. Just put it together as m squared minus 5m plus 6. Now is that problem done? What does it look like you could do with that numerator? You factor it. See, that's what we learned. There's kind of a building up to this. Okay, we got to factor, then see if anything cancels. All right, so I'm going to leave the m minus 2 the way it is. Now we're going to draw 2 parentheses on that numerator, and you got to be really careful on this now and make sure that you have everything right. So you have m and m. Now it looks like at first glance there's 2 possibilities. There's 6 and 1, and you can make 6 and 1 add up to -5. But also, what is there? 2 and 3. Only one of them's right. Okay, and the 2 and 3 is the correct choice. Because how do you make 2 and 3 add up to -5? 2 negatives, right? 2 negatives. Okay, that's right. If you did the other way, 6 and 1, you wouldn't be able to find that pattern on that. Okay, so now what happens? M minus 2 cancels, so we go ahead and cancel that. Okay, that's really a 1/1 like that. Now what you're left with is m minus 3. I just want to put that 1 for emphasis, only for emphasis. So you never need to have 1 in the denominator, so that's m minus 3.
What happened to the other end?
Say that again? Yeah, you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Any questions on that? So see, once you combine it, a lot of times factoring and canceling is the next thing you do, if you can do that. Okay? So let's run through a couple more of these. Okay, so this one again is you already have a common denominator. So you're going to write this in one fraction. And when you do 2m plus negative 10, the best way to write that is just 2m minus 10. So is that problem done? No. How come? Because you can factor. How do you factor that numerator? You take a 2 out. So you must do that. You don't go through and start canceling stuff. You don't cancel the m's out. Remember, you have to factor, then cancel in that order. So I'm going to take a 2 out of the top. And that will leave me m minus 5. So that's how you factor that numerator. We've been doing that all class. Then what happens? That crosses. What's the answer? 2. Okay, like that. Okay, so that's the idea. All right, is that solid? Okay. All right, watch this one very carefully. Students are really bad about messing this one up. So what I recommend that you do on this one is, you know that you're going to keep that common denominator of 2. So let's go ahead and resist the temptation to do anything in our head. Just write it like this. And the thing that's important on this is when you subtract something, that really changes those signs in that numerator like that. So that's why I'm having you write the 9a plus 5b in parentheses. And particularly what's important is that's got to be in parentheses. Because when you subtract that, how's that going to affect the signs? That's going to be what? Minus 9a and then what? Plus 5b. That's the most common thing that students overlook in this problem. So I recommend that you start the problem this way. Now, I don't really need the parentheses around the first one. That's not necessary, but it's very necessary on the second one. Now, when you remove the parentheses, you've got minus 9a, and a minus minus is a plus 5b like that. Okay? Everybody with me on that? You have to pay attention to that extremely carefully. Yes? Because anytime that you subtract an entire expression, like if you had something like, say you had something like that, that's really kind of like a distributive property. So that would be like negative 1x plus 2. Because see, what you're really doing is, you're doing this. You're subtracting 9a. But then what are you doing? Subtracting a negative. So what is subtracting a negative? It's adding. So you got to be extremely careful. Now, notice the 9a's cross out, right? So what we're left with is 10b over 2. Is that done? No. What's the answer? You can do this in your head. 5b, right? Okay, because you can do this. Now, you can do this in your head, but you can also write the 10 as 2 times 5. Then you can cross it out, so you're left with 5b. Like that. But the key on this problem is right here. Okay, when you're doing your homework and stuff, you got to pay attention to that. And you don't want to mess up on that little piece there. If you're subtracting, watch that very, very carefully. Okay? Everybody okay?
Just didn't figure what that minus thing came from.
Yeah, subtraction, be very careful. Addition, you don't have to worry about it on. Okay, so let's just do these next 4 here to kind of finish up class here today. There is going to be some factoring on some of these things. Let's just kind of see if we can get through these to finish up. Then what we'll do next time in class is we'll work with problems where you have to find a common denominator. So let's at least get these 3 right here done. A couple of these. So yeah, this one you just keep the denominator. 12 minus 6 is 6. Problem done. There's no factoring. If you can't factor anything, then you are done. Okay, that's the idea. Okay, next one you go like this. Keep the m minus 4. And then when you combine that numerator, if you're adding negative 12, it's best to just write it this way. It's the same thing. Now, what can you do with the numerator? Take the 3 out. See, you can factor. That means you can go further. Do not cross the 3's and all that stuff out. You have to factor first. So if you did the factoring, you would have had that. Now, what's the answer to this problem? 3. Okay, so you should have got 3 on that one. Okay, everybody good? Okay, next one goes like this. This is probably a little harder. So you keep the y minus 1. Then you would have 8y to the second. Instead of saying plus negative, I'm going to say minus 8y. Now, how do you factor the numerator? You can factor it. How do you do it? You take an 8y out, right? That's got a common factor. You don't do two parentheses. They both have an 8, and they have a y squared and a y to the first. You work with the lowest exponent. So if you did that correctly, then you would have that. Okay, what's the answer to this problem? 8y. You got a y there also. Okay, like that. Okay. All right, everybody good? Okay. First step's nothing to the first step, and then the rest of it's the factoring we've been working on. All right, let's close off here with this last problem here. This is the one that you got to be super duper careful with because it's a subtraction problem. So what I'm going to do is 2a plus 3b. I don't care about parentheses on that, but I care a lot about parentheses on the second one. If you didn't do that, you would have missed the problem. Okay? So what you're going to have is 2a plus 3b. Now what are you going to have here when you subtract that? Minus 2a plus 3b, right? Okay, be super careful with that. Okay? And pay attention to that when you're doing your homework. What happens? 2a's cross out. What are you left with? 6b over 2. So what's the answer? 3b. Everybody got that? Okay? So anytime that you see a subtraction problem, I always recommend when you see a subtraction problem that you realize immediately that second one's in a set of parentheses. Okay? All right. So that'll finish this up for today. Bring this next time and also bring the 6-4 because we'll try to get through both of those things next time.